All right, everybody. How are we doing? Welcome back to another edition of Baseball Scoops. We are getting to the nitty gritty of these previews. We only got a few left, and we are going to talk about the fish, the Miami Marlins. This should be very, very, very interesting. It was a team that really was in the playoff mix until the bitter end because that final wild card spot got pretty competitive towards the end. You had the Marlins in the mix, obviously the Reds who clinched. You had the Mets in the mix. The Diamondbacks were still lingering around. But I think this team is really, really fascinating. It has a lot of upside. I think when you really look at the nitty gritty of this team and how they're building this thing, you got to at least hope they're trying to build this thing the right way. I think they've made the necessary move this offseason to kind of at least form a foundation, but you do have some questions kind of with certain players. We're going to kind of touch on those players. But this team was really fun. This team really was impressive across the board. I mean, it was a fun team to watch. They sparked people's interest. I think they have a lot of young players that made key impacts throughout the year. I do think this is a team that has players that are watchable. And they, for a team like the Marlins playing in the division that they play in, where you have the Mets, the Phillies, the Braves, you have those teams, ahead of them. It's like, what does that look like? Right? Like, how can this team kind of stack up? Now, I don't think they are going to sniff, maybe a playoff spot because I think the NL is just a gauntlet. But this is a team that really can make some noise. And I mean, you look at some of the production that they got from these players last year. Like, you look at a guy like Otto Lopez, 15 home runs. I'm going to kind of go through these a little individually because I think these are important. I mean, he definitely took I guess you can say a step forward per se. I mean, he's going to give you really, really, really great defense at second base. He was 95th percentile in that regard. His approach to the plate is really good, where he doesn't whiff, doesn't strike out. I mean, his slash line definitely took a dip with more plate appearances, but he did hit 15 home runs, did steal 15 bases. You're not gonna get a lot of power, but you're gonna get a lot of contact. And he does have some good sprint speed. So, players like him, very, very useful, right? I think a player that's really fascinating is a player like Xavier Edwards. He also had his third year. So you have guys that are kind of, in their third year. He definitely had a career year in terms of what his plate appearances and his at bats. Hit 3 home runs, but he stole 27 bases. So he's a guy who's stolen at least 20 bases each of the last 2 seasons. So you kind of know what you're getting there. Same kind of thing as Lopez. Good approach in terms of the whiffs, the strikeouts. The walk rate is really neck and neck with him. The defense was still pretty solid over there at shortstop. Kind of intrigued at where they're actually going to go ahead and put him. We're going to look at the depth chart here really quick where they have these guys slotted because they might make some changes. Otto Lopez is going to slide over to shortstop, and Xavier Edwards is going to slide over to second base, according to the Fangraphs depth chart, which that actually makes sense when you look at the fielding. You do look at his shortstop ability. I mean, he was -3 this year in defensive runs saved, -7 in outs above average. He was a better second baseman. He had 12 defensive runs saved and 9 outs above average. So that's really key. And I think it'll pay off too for a guy like Lopez who can kind of shift over and give you good, adequate defense. So I do like that shift there. Very similar players in their profile. But I think really good young upside players that are really worth tuning into. And I do think like you have guys too, like Connor Norby is there. He's going to get some good looks. I think the fascinating one, I'm gonna wait to dive into Jacob Marcy, but I think Augustin Ramirez is huge. He came over. He was the piece in the Jazz Chisholm trade. I mean, 21 home runs, 16 stolen bases, a really good power hitting catcher. The bat speed is top tier, 89th percentile, makes good hard contact, barrels the ball well. The thing he is working on is his defense behind the plate because, I mean, at this point he almost profiles as a DH, which really wouldn't be a bad thing to have if you are the Marlins, but he does want to improve defensively behind the plate, which I think would pay off, given ABS is coming. And I think, there's things you can work on. He's only 24 years old, but there's so much upside with him. That was a really good move by the Fish, getting that type of player into their fold. The big piece is Kyle Stowers. For the longest time, with this Marlins team, he was playing so well, and it was, wow, look what the Marlins got. They get Kyle Stowers for, Rogers, and Rogers hadn't really hit his ceiling yet, but it was looking like a major, major win, and rightfully so. This is a guy who had 25 home runs. He had a career year in terms of the slash line, especially with the opportunity he got at the plate, where he hit 288 with a 368 OBP, a 544 slug, and a 912 OPS. The only thing that's really alarming is the strikeouts. I mean, 27.4%, 6th percentile in whiff rate. But he's got 74th percentile in walk rate, which is huge, 10.5%. You'd love to see that. The bat speed's elite. The hard hit rate is 94th percentile. The barrel rate is 98th percentile. So a really good player who's going to give you a lot of pop. He's going to give you a lot of flair. He's going to give you sufficient defense. But this is a guy who really popped off and made a massive, massive impact. He was an all-star this year. Like, Kyle Stowers is now what you could say is like the nucleus of this team. He had a career year in terms of pulling the ball, pulled the ball extremely well in the air, a significant upgrade from 2024, where it was only at 10.1%, and he raised it to 23.7%. League average is 16.7%. So he did really well in that regard across the board. He had a career year, and I think it's like that was his coming out party. But I do think that Kyle Stowers is a player that's only going to get better. So it's really, really exciting. It's really, really fun, especially if you're a fan of this team. And I think another player that really needs to be on everyone's radar is Jacob Marcy. He's going to play in center field. He's a really good defender. He's another player that good approach. His walk rate's up there, 9.4%. The strikeouts, he does fairly well at limiting those. Doesn't swing and miss, doesn't swing outside the zone, squares things up. He can make hard contact, but it's a guy who came in 209 at bats, 234 plate appearances. He hit 292 with an 841 OPS. I think the sky is the limit for him. He's looked really good in the WBC for Team Italy. So this is a guy that I think is going to have another really good year. Isn't afraid to use his sprint speed. This is a guy who stole 14 bases, hit 5 home runs. I think a full year of him, you're in really, really, really nice shape. And let's go into the offseason moves, and I want to start with the big one, because I think this is one that kind of shapes the core of what the Cubs are, or not the Cubs, but the Cubs are, I mean, they did their due diligence. They got Edward Cabrera, which really shapes the foundation of their rotation, but you're also establishing your outfield now. You're looking at an outfield that will feature Kyle Stowers, Jacob Marcy, and you're looking at, Owen Casey. Owen Casey was the top prospect in the Cubs farm system at the time of this trade. He comes over. He's going to have every chance to make the opening day roster. Really, really massive upside. He's very similar to Stowers in their plate approach, right? This is a guy who is 92nd percentile hard hit rate and 96th percentile barrel rate. These are his AAA stats. It didn't exactly translate to the MLB level, but similar approach, because look, like we just went over the fact that the walk rate was 74th percentile at 10.5%. Well, in AAA, he walked 13.2%, good for 75th percentile. There's not much chase outside the zone, but the K rate is really high, 27.9%. So there's another guy too that's going to give you good contact. He's going to hit for average. He's going to hit for power, but expect some swing and miss, expect some strikeouts. It's kind of crazy that they have similar profiled players on either side of the corners of the outfield. So that's going to be really fascinating to watch. But I think Owen Casey is another really good guy to have in the fold. Good pull ability, good power. Again, he makes good contact. It's another really good upside player that the Miami Marlins now have in their system. And it's something they can build around. It's something they can have as a foundation. And that's really the important thing is, I think when you look at this team and you look at the bats, it's very good upside. Jacob Marcy, I think, is going to be a really good talent. Kyle Stowers, I loved what we saw from him last year. I think the sky is the limit. He's only going to get better. Owen Casey, I think there's potential here. We will see how it translates at the MLB level, but this is a guy I think that can make an immediate impact offensively for this Marlins team that's trying to establish more of what their core is going to be. I think Otto Lopez, Xavier Edwards, they're going to take good necessary steps, but good pieces to have. And Augustin Ramirez, if he elevates his defensive play behind the plate, he's a good hitter. He showed that this year. So there's a lot of upside here when you look at the Miami Marlins. You look at some of the other moves, nothing crazy. I mean, they traded Ryan Weathers, which makes a lot of sense. They got a nice package back to strengthen the pipeline. They acquired Esteury Urez from the Dodgers just for good outfield depth. They got Chris Paddock on a 1-year deal. They even brought in Pete Fairbanks, and I think that's a really nice piece. Christopher Morel's coming in. He kind of bounced around. He was with the Rays, the Cubs, but they're trying to build a younger and faster roster, which is really nice. But yeah, Pete Fairbanks is a massive, massive thing, and that's kind of where we can transfer over. You look at this Marlins team; they've always had good back end guys, right? This is a guy who's got great closer ability. He's notched 20-plus saves each of the last 3 seasons, a 2.83 ERA, 59 strikeouts, and 60.1 innings pitched. Like, you know what you're going to get. It's good reliability. It's a guy who kind of wanted to stay in the area anyway, which I get. Like, you love Florida. Your family's there. Like, there's no need to uproot them to just sign somewhere. But, yeah, I like this move for them. And then, obviously, if all things go south, you just obviously make a trade at the deadline. But it's good. It's a good, reliable back end arm with great closer ability, and you kind of solidify that position. Like, who your closer is going to be. And you look at this team, even in the last couple of years, like, who's kind of closing games for you. Obviously, those guys got moved, but you knew who was going to come out and close games. I want to shift to the rotation because I think the rotation is going to be something special. And it's got upside, and I'm curious to see how it looks this year. Max Meyer, he's going to obviously form this 3-headed monster at the top of the rotation. Injuries kind of derailed his entire season. He only made 12 starts, but he had a 4.73 ERA, 68 strikeouts, and 64.2 innings pitched. Good command. The walk rates were low, which is great. Keeps the ball on the ground, which is huge when you have that nice middle infield defense. The strikeouts were fine. Good swing and miss in his game. His stuff isn't horrible. He did get he still gives up a lot of hard contact. So seeing if he can limit that kind of damage will be key. His stuff is good. I like his stuff. His slider is massive. That is his top thrown pitch. Throws it to righties and lefties. Does not matter. 209 batting average against, only a 382 slug. That was one of 2 pitches that only had a slugging percentage within the 300s. 42.4% whiff rate. When you look at his put away pitches, the sinker and the changeup are very neck and neck. The 4-seamer is only 13.1. He puts away batters 32.3% of the time with the slider. So the slider is a very bread and butter pitch that evidently had better run value this year than years past. The only pitch that had a top run value. So I'm curious to see what his arsenal looked like. But I think a pitcher that has really, really good upside. Yuri Perez is another one. His year was really interesting. Still made 20 starts, missed all of 2024, but comes back. He threw 95.1 innings, a 4.25 ERA. So you want to see that get a little lower. His walk rates were fine. The strikeout rates were high. The swing and miss in his game was super high. He does a really, really, really he does a good job in the swing and miss game. Good strikeouts. You go to his arsenal, and his secondaries were fine. His changeup was fairly good. The sweeper was good. His whiff rates were great. His changeup had a 61.1% whiff rate, and the sweeper was 46.4%. Slider was 39.9%. So he has good upside with his stuff. So he's probably going to spearhead this rotation too. But I think the big one is Sandy Alcantara. And that is really the main component, the main factor. And things for him were interesting. I'm just going to go to his splits because the splits were key. You go to the first half, and the first half was pretty ugly. He had a 7.22 ERA. The strikeout percentage was 17.3%. He was walking batters 9.9% of the time. So his K minus BB was only 8.3%. So he was getting pretty knocked around, 12 home runs given up. But you go to the second half, little different. The second half was definitely a lot different than the first half. Kind of waiting for this to load. He had a 3.33 ERA. He only gave up 10 home runs. You go to his other metrics, and his other metrics were really good. You go to the K percentage, it was 21.3%. Only walking batters 6% of the time, a 15.3 K minus BB. So he was pitching much better in the second half. The stuff was good. It was playing up really, really well. And that's the fun part, is Sandy started to look kind of like himself. He made 31 starts, so at least he's getting the starts. A slow first half that kind of turned around in the second half quite a bit. He had better results. He was missing more bats. He had good swing and miss ability in the second half compared to the first half. So his overall, like, if you look at his baseball savant, it's kind of wacky because I don't think it tells the entire story because he had a tale of two halves. But you look at kind of like his velocity, and the velocity on the sinker was relatively the same. The four-seamer lost a little bit of velo, but it was pretty close. The slider, he definitely threw a lot more than in 2023. The cutter was his least thrown pitch, but he still threw it quite a bit. He saw more success. I mean, a 28% whiff rate on the changeup. He beat you in different ways. He found different ways to kind of get to you as a hitter. I'm just fascinated to see how this goes because you look at Sandy and it's like, what do they do with him? You know, do they opt to keep him? Do they trade him? It's interesting because obviously you couldn't trade him in the first half because he didn't have a lot of value. But if he starts out kind of hot, I mean, who knows what they do with him? I mean, they could probably get a good package. And you've got to imagine if they're out of it by the deadline and they're selling and teams are coming calling because he's healthy and he's showing that he's pitching really well, there's a good chance that Sandy Alcantara could be moved. It's just I wonder what they do because it seems like the future of this rotation is going to be a Yuri Perez, a Max Meyer, and they're going to integrate guys, and that's not even including you look at their other prospects. Like you're gonna get guys like Thomas White and Robbie Snelling. Like they're gonna make some moves here, and they're going to make their case to be part of this rotation. And that's the thing about the Marlins is they have really, really, really good upside with their prospects in the pitching pipeline. Like that's really what they have. You know, they're trying to establish that with their position group. But you know, Ava Arquette, he's far away. Joe Mack could make a very good case to be in tandem with Ramirez, and Owen Casey's probably going to start. But yeah, Robbie Snelling and Thomas White are going to make their case to be part of this rotation. And if you're going to pass the torch along to those guys, Sandy Alcantara is a player that very much could be moved in this very case. For me, from an exciting factor, I'm excited to see another year of Kyle Stowers because I think the potential there is great. I think he's an impact bat. I think he's a phenomenal player. He's pretty much the core of this team. He's like the nucleus of this team. That's what they should be building around. You know, it's going to be really, really, really interesting to see if they even eventually go and lock him up further down the line. And the players that I'm watching for, it is the Thomas Whites, the Robbie Snellings, the Owen Caseys, because I think like here you guys go. Like this is your team now. Like time to go in, time to make your mark, time to make your impact. So it's going to be really interesting. I think the Fish are doing things the right way. I think they're building this thing the right way. all eyes on Sandy to see what his future is, but I think this team is really, really exciting, has a lot of upside. So I understand it's a small market team. I understand they're kind of at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to this division, but I do think this team has a lot of upside. I think this team has a lot of potential, and I think this team has players that are worth tuning into. So, I understand everyone watches their team and they stick within their comfort zone of their own team. But if you branch out, the Marlins are definitely a team to put on your television. Especially nowadays you can multi-screen. So, yeah, the Fish are fun. This is going to be a fun team. I'm very excited. But that wraps up the Miami Marlins preview. I hope everyone enjoyed this. And without further ado,